Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Reiser in for Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. The richest man in the world goes to space.
Woo! Oh, wow. So you have to look out the window. Oh, he did that. Oh, wow.
Jeff Bezos and crew making history with their successful rocket launch. So what's next for the future of space travel?
CDC has released estimates of variants across the country and predicted the Delta variant now represents 83% of sequenced cases. This is a dramatic increase up from 50% the week of July 3rd.
The nation's top doctors testifying on Capitol Hill as the Delta variant surges. Their messages on masks and vaccines with the school year right around the corner. And clashing over ice cream, Ben & Jerry's will stop selling its products in Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory. The growing backlash from the Middle East and its parent company. We start today with Jeff Bezos rocketing into orbit. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky is in Van Horn, Texas, checking his phone for the very latest developments here. So, Morgan, when Bezos touched down, he said it was the best day ever. What else did he say about today's trip?
He said that it was really a wild success, Lindsay, and that everything that needed to go right did go right. 15 test flights from Blue Origin before today. Today, the 16th, the first manned flight skyward, and everything went seamless. From the countdown, there was a slight pause at the 15-minute mark, but it resumed. And then we were all witness to history, this all-civilian flight that went up, breaking that boundary of space, giving everyone on board, Jeff Bezos, his brother Mark, of course, the oldest and now the youngest astronaut in history, about 3 to 4 minutes of weightlessness before they came back for a nice soft landing in the middle of the West Texas desert, courtesy of 3 massive parachutes. But to really understand how it felt, you have to hear from those on board. And here's how Bezos summed it up himself earlier today. Take a listen.
Now, on how it felt. Oh my God! My expectations were high and they were dramatically exceeded. The zero-G piece may have been one of the biggest surprises because it felt so normal. It felt so almost like we were, as humans, evolved to be in that environment, which I know is impossible, but it felt so serene and peaceful in the floating.
And 82-year-old Wally Funk shared that enjoyment of that weightlessness feeling. We actually had audio during the flight, and you could just hear her just gleeful shrieks of joy. Her finally getting a chance to go to space after training for the Mercury missions back in the 60s and being unable to take part because she is in fact a woman. It was a great crowning achievement for her. And then to hear 18-year-old Oliver Damon just essentially share that he hopes that this inspires a younger generation to get interested in space travel and space exploration. There was history made here in the desert today, and right now there's many more trips to come, at least according to Blue Origin and Mr. Bezos. Lindsay.
I mean, it's so cool not only to see them tossing the little orange ball in there, but to actually see the silhouette of the Earth in that video in the background. Just incredible. I mean, you know, Morgan, one of the things I found really interesting in this whole thing was Bezos kept talking about how fragile the Earth is and that trip renewed his commitment to protect the Earth from climate change. The atmosphere, he kept saying, is so fragile from his view up there. So how will he focus his work on that in the years to come?
Well, he's certainly, and to answer that question, you have to point to the fact that he has been the target of some criticism, kind of blaming this trip as nothing but a billionaire joyride. But Bezos pointing out 2 things. And number 1, this is the first step of many from a space front. Number 2, one of the reasons he is so interested in further developing this space growth, this road to space, as he called it, is because he wants to one day see a planet Earth where all of the heavy-duty machinery that, contributes to pollution is moved off of the planet and into space. And he says that one of the reasons he's so passionate about that is because of how delicate the Earth is and how, much of an impact he's already seen climate change have on the planet. And here's what he had to say in that regard. Take a listen.
we're these tiny little things, and the planet, the atmosphere is so big. But when you get up above it, what you see is it's actually incredibly thin. It's this tiny little fragile thing. And as we move about the planet, we're damaging it. And, so that is, that's a very profound. It's one thing to recognize that intellectually. It's another thing to actually see with your own eyes how fragile it really is.
And we have heard astronauts before say that once you are granted that one-of-a-kind perspective where you can look down and see the planet yourself encased in that thin atmosphere, it does forever change you. And I think that, what you just heard from Jeff Bezos is evidence of that. He also, of course, says that his focus right now since stepping down from Amazon is space exploration and climate change. And time will tell just how those two will be interwoven from an initiative standpoint, from a project standpoint. But as far as Blue Origin goes, the company says that because today was a success, they do have plans in place to have a flight as early as September or October using the exact same rocket that they use today. Lindsay?
Yeah, Bezos saying that he wants to move those really harmful industries into outer space and, generations to come, that today was a first step toward that. But Morgan, it's so funny you mentioned the future of Blue Origin. Remember that guy that won the auction at $28 million and had a scheduling conflict? And that's why this 18-year-old was able to move up.
I mean, invest in a better planner, do something, hire a virtual assistant. But at least young Oliver had that shot because a lot of people will say, what was historic about today? America has been to space before, but to have an all-civilian crew on a rocket that was controlled from the ground, that took a capsule up, broke apart, the rocket landed successfully, the capsule then went into suborbital space, then came down with a nice soft landing in the Texas desert, I'd say that's pretty historic. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the future months and years to come in this little piece of the West Texas desert. Lindsay?
Yeah, the way you describe it like that, I don't know. Maybe he had a root canal he couldn't, reschedule. Who knows? All right, Morgan, thanks so much. Let's go ahead and bring in former astronaut Ron Garan now. He's also the author of Floating in Darkness, A Journey of Evolution. So, Colonel, this crew was up in outer space for, we heard Morgan say, about 3 to 4 minutes. They experienced that weightless feeling. You spent 6+ months up there, and you guys are all part of a very small club. So what is it like up there, and how do you feel now that this small club is expanding?
Well, Lindsay, I think it's great that it's expanding because I think the more people that see the planet from that vantage point, the better off we're all going to be. And, you heard Jeff Bezos talk about the thinness of the atmosphere. There's nothing that can prepare somebody for that. I flew in space 8 years after I became an astronaut. I listened to 8 years of crews coming back and saying how thin the atmosphere was, and I still was amazed. And it's scary. It's a sobering thought to think that paper thin layer keeps every living thing on the planet alive. And so I think the more people that see that reality, see the truth, that it's not just the big blue sky when you look up to the sky, that we really can make a difference. We really can make an impact, positive or negative, on that thing that protects us. And I think that's one of the reasons why we do this.
And this has been pretty polarizing, of course, if you go onto Twitter, of course, everything is polarizing. But Blue Origin's mission statement says it was founded by Jeff Bezos with the vision of enabling a future where millions of people are living and working in space to benefit Earth. So do you see this new space tourism industry as just something for the uber rich to experience, or do you think it could go mainstream?
I think it's for the uber rich right now, with some exceptions. I know there's efforts to democratize space travel right now, but I think these are the baby steps where hopefully this is the dawn of a new era of space travel, where space travel becomes as commonplace as air travel, and it's reminiscent of the early days of aviation, where it was not a commonplace thing where people flew on airplanes. It was a select few that got to see the planet from the perspective of the air, and I think we're at the dawn of a new era where that becomes commonplace for people to fly in space. And I think, like I said, these are the baby steps. I think when you bring in economies of scale, reusability, new technologies, the price is going to come down. And it's not just about tourism either. It's going to be about transportation. It's going to be even going from point A to point B on the planet and doing it in a fraction of the time, where a portion of the flight path is going to be outside the atmosphere. And that'll be wonderful. I don't think there'll be any middle seats on those flights, though.
Yeah, probably not having to fight over the armrest. But I want to get your take, because every former astronaut that I have had the honor to speak with over, the last 10 plus days, with Branson and Bezos blasting off, they've been so excited about this because of the scientific achievements. I mean, what do you hope will be gained also in the larger picture? So, yes, we have the appreciation here for how vulnerable we are, maybe something finally that the country can unify around. But in terms of scientific and engineering feats, what are you most excited about?
Well, one of the big ones is reusability, and the entire New Shepard rocket and capsule is all reusable, and that's going to bring the cost down. But there's also going to be scientific experiments conducted on these flights, and so these are experiments that cannot be conducted anywhere else on Earth, and they give results that we wouldn't have otherwise. And so there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon, new materials, new ways to produce energy. There's all kinds of technological and scientific benefits that can come from this. It's a complicated issue. There are a lot of valid reasons to be frustrated with the nature of things and to simplify this into a billionaire space race. But it's a lot more nuanced and a lot more complex than that. And I think there's the potential for tremendous benefits for all of us because this is pushing us forward in the way of technology.
Colonel Guerin, we are so grateful to you for your time in helping us explain all those nuances. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Lindsay.
Now to the coronavirus pandemic and also some of the new guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics recommending all students over the age of 2 return to school with masks on, vaccinated or not. Let's get to NBC News correspondent Ron Allen in Jersey City, New Jersey. So, Ron, you're standing outside of one of Jersey City's largest summer school programs. How are parents and students reacting?
Well, this is a K through 8 kids are under age 12, about 7th grade, and therefore are not eligible to get vaccinated. And that's what a lot of the parents are focused on. And so they are pleased that they don't have any problem with the guidelines that suggest that every student should wear a mask, because they feel like their kids, these young kids, are very vulnerable. And that's essentially what the American Academy of Pediatrics is saying, that to protect everyone, that you need to mask up all the students from age 2 to older. But here, again, because it's such young children, they are very happy to see their kids wearing masks. And that's what the rule is here now during summer school. Take a listen to what some of the parents told us when we asked them about this.
The people that are getting the coronavirus are the Delta variant, and that is the most contagious, and it's affecting children. So in my opinion, I feel like it should be mandated.
We're not against it because it actually prevents other, like colds and other, summer stuff that's been going on. So we're okay with it. I think it's a little healthier for the kids.
I believe the kids should wear masks. They're the only ones that have not been vaccinated. Our whole household is vaccinated, except for him. And I think it's very important that the children stay safe, especially going back to school full time, non-remote, in person is, I'm scared.
Yeah?
I'm scared, yeah.
We even heard from one parent who said that he lost a child, a 10-year-old daughter, during the height of the pandemic a year or so ago, and he was there with his other young son wearing a mask and saying, of course, I want my kid to wear a mask. A tragic story, but of course that does happen, although it is rare. But again, here, especially because these are young kids, the parents want to see them wearing masks. Lindsay?
And you went into the reasoning here behind the AAP's decision, but what else can you tell us about? I mean, it is pretty controversial. I mean, we talked to a pediatrician yesterday who wasn't entirely pleased with this. But what else can you tell us behind the decision for this recommendation, which, again, doesn't necessarily fall in line with what the CDC is saying?
Right. I think a lot of people object to the idea that it's mandatory, that you have to do this. And a lot of people feel that this disease, we've heard this all along, does not affect children in such a severe way, so there's no need for masking. You also hear from teachers who feel like they want to wear masks, and they want the kids to wear masks because they're vulnerable as well. We can read you something from the Academy's statement about this, explaining why they are mandating, why they're saying that a mandate is necessary. They say, in part, remote learning highlighted the inequities in education, was detrimental to the educational attainment of students of all ages, and exacerbated the mental health crisis among children and adolescents. The benefits of in-person school outweigh the risks in almost all circumstances. And that, of course, is what's driving all of this discussion about masks, is that everyone or so many people want to see kids back in school because so much time was lost during the last school year. So at the base of all this is that desire to get kids back in school. And this particular organization believes that masking up is the best way to do that.
Yeah, nobody wants to see what we went through in the last school year with that mix and never knowing what the next week was going to bring. All right, Ron Allen, thank you so much. In Tokyo, dozens of people connected to the Olympics have tested positive for COVID-19. The list includes some who were fully vaccinated against the virus. For more now, I want to bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Vin Gupta. Dr. Gupta, at least 60 people have tested positive in Tokyo so far, including, we know, some high-profile people. Carrie Eaker, an alternate on the U.S. women's gymnastics team. She was fully vaccinated. So what do you make here of the situation? And can anything more be done to prevent more cases in the village?
Well, fundamentally, and thank you for having me, the question should be, do we need to be testing fully vaccinated, otherwise healthy Olympians? And in my view, we shouldn't be. And the Olympic Committee really needs to think long and hard about what are the standards by which we hold athletes out. If you have a fully vaccinated athlete that's otherwise healthy and asymptomatic, the chances that even if they tested positive, Lindsay, that they could transmit the virus to somebody else is exceedingly small. We think maybe less than 0.1%. And so that's why in the U.S., for example, if you're fully vaccinated and asymptomatic, we don't even want to test you. So that is the consideration here, given what's at stake, that we need to be really mindful here of keeping these athletes out that otherwise are probably not harmful to anybody else around them.
Well, and a lot of the people who have tested positive are now in isolation. Some athletes have been forced to quit the games. They've been training their entire lives for this, and now they're going to have to wait another 4 years if they're even able to. Yesterday, when we talked to Dr. Kavita Patel, she said this is proof right now that the protocols are working. Do you agree?
I think the protocols are too stringent, frankly. And in my view, again, if you look at the case of Coco Gauff, who we don't know is symptomatic or not, if the data shows that if we have fully vaccinated young people, otherwise healthy, the chances that they could transmit the virus, Lindsay, to somebody else is essentially zero. And we have to be able to pivot. And we have to be able to apply the latest science to what we're doing in terms of protocols. So no, I don't think we should be testing Olympians that are fully vaccinated and otherwise healthy. It doesn't really make any sense because it's not going to create for a safer environment because we know that they're unlikely to transmit the virus.
Yeah, we don't know if Coco Gauff was vaccinated yet, but we are working on figuring that out. Dr. Gupta, I'm really fascinated about all of this and also how it translates here to us at home. I mean, we know that breakthrough cases they tend to be pretty mild. The whole point of the vaccine is it's not 100% effective in preventing the virus, but it's almost 100, if not 100% effective in preventing hospitalizations and deaths. But we are seeing some severe breakthrough cases. So who's most vulnerable for those and what should they be doing?
Well, we define high risk as for individuals that are older than 65 years of age or who have an immunocompromising condition, recent cancer on chemotherapy, high doses of steroids for, say, rheumatoid arthritis. It's a long list, so I encourage your viewers to talk to your doctor if that may be you. For those individuals, you are at higher risk of vaccine breakthrough disease, even though it's still exceptionally rare for you if you're older than 65 or have one of those conditions. But that's who is potentially at risk for getting sick, even if they're fully vaccinated. For everybody else, and that's most of America, especially if you've gotten 2 doses of Pfizer or Moderna, the chances that you'll even end up testing positive are exceptional. The chances that you'd end up in the hospital are essentially zero.
So, Dr. Gupta, real quick before we let you go, does that mean that immunized grandma, grandpa, or somebody with compromised immune systems should still be masking if it's possible that their breakthrough case, we know it might be a minuscule chance that they get it, but if they do, it could be more serious?
I would encourage anybody that's high risk to continue masking in public, absolutely. So the 2 categories we just mentioned, and that they're all will also likely be the first in line for a booster when it becomes available end of fall.
Dr. Gupta, you always help us make some sense of what's going on. We appreciate it. Good to see you. Let's go to NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce following the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Hey, Simone, what do you have for us?
Hey, Lindsay, we're going to start with the latest on the U.S.-China cyber attack tensions. So China rejecting an accusation by the United States that Beijing hacked the Microsoft Exchange email system. So a foreign ministry spokesman demanding that Washington drop charges against 4 Chinese nationals accused of trying to steal U.S. technology and disease research. Well, J. Thomas Manger is set to be the next chief of the U.S. Capitol Police in the aftermath of the January 6th Capitol riot. He served as chief in Montgomery County, Maryland for 15 years and was selected for this position following an extensive search. That's according to 4 people briefed on the matter. And the United States women's gymnastics team will not be staying at Tokyo's Olympic Village during the Games. The team's coach confirming on Twitter that her athletes will be staying at a nearby hotel instead because they can control the athletes and their safety better in that setting. The coach adding that the team made this decision together. And unfortunately, India's COVID deaths could be 10 times higher than the official tally. That's according to new research. India's official numbers sit closer to 414,000, but the report says the toll could actually be in the millions. Now, the government, however, is dismissing the figures as exaggerated and misleading. And a bicyclist in Florida suffering serious injuries after being attacked by a 9-foot-long alligator. So this cyclist is an experienced rider who just lost control on a curve before plunging into the water where the alligator grabbed him. The victim was airlifted to a hospital, and the alligator was captured by a trapper and will be relocated. And Lindsay, that is why you will never find me on a bike anywhere near a swamp.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, what a wrong turn. Can you imagine of all the other possible places to wipe out? Very scary, Simone. Hopefully that person's okay. Thank you. Thomas Barrack, the chairman of former President Trump's 2017 inaugural committee, has been arrested on federal charges. According to an unsealed indictment, Barrack is accused of acting as an agent for the United Arab Emirates and lying about it. Let's bring in NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter. So, Tom, Barrack is due in federal court this afternoon. What more can you tell us about the charges against him?
That's right. And as a matter of fact, his spokesperson we've spoken with and says that he will be pleading not guilty and that Barrack was involved with in speaking to federal agents. Of course, according to these charges, they're charging him with lying to those federal agents about a special phone that he had with an encrypted messaging app, as well as several other statements that Barrack made. One of the key things that prosecutors in arguing for Barrack's removal from California, where he was arrested, to New York, specifically Brooklyn, where the charges were filed, is that this is somebody who has extensive overseas ties in the United Arab Emirates and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He's a citizen of Lebanon, so all 3 places that the U.S. does not have an extradition agreement with. On top of that, he's got a private airplane and assets and money estimated to be $1 billion, according to Forbes. So prosecutors say that's the reason why he needs to be removed to New York. But one of the things that they say that he did here was provide non-public sensitive information to the United Arab Emirates, specifically about their blockade of Qatar, and that it was information about how other administration officials felt about that blockade, as well as movements with inside the Trump information. So it wasn't just influencing, according to prosecutors, also information that Barrack provided about the Trump administration that helps, they say, prove their charges. Lindsay?
Yeah, what do we know about what evidence they have to prove that?
Well, one of the things that they talk about is the amount of emails, text messages. They say they have video recordings. They have statements. So the evidence here at this point appears to be fairly strong, according to prosecutors. One of the things that's interesting is the type of text messages that you have going back and forth. We've really seen very few FARA-type cases, failing to register as a foreign agent-type cases brought before. It was certainly not a case, the types of cases that were prosecuted much before Special Counsel Robert Mueller made it one of kind of the key charges in several of the investigations in his case. But I think, Lindsay, here, one of the things that they can prove is intent. And I think lying to the federal agents is probably something that might help them in their case. It's not just one thing to say, well, I was just, I have clients and I'm telling the administration what those clients think, and I'm giving my clients a readout of what I think is happening in the United States. It was that additional phone and the encrypted messaging app. It's the lies to investigators. It's the text messages exchanges that, in interactions. And by the way, didn't just occur while Trump was running for president, but while he was president. According to the indictment, he would meet with one of these Emirati officials and then schedule and reach out to the White House to schedule a meeting with the president. So it's that kind of direct contact here that I think is going to be very difficult for Barrack, potentially in court. But today we just have an indictment so far. Barrack, again, has said that he's going to plead not guilty to these charges when he does enter that plea. And we'll just have to see how this case progresses.
Tell us about the relationship between Barrack and Trump, which dates well before the inauguration.
Right. Yeah, this goes long before. I mean, Barrack really, for people that weren't close observers of Donald Trump prior to him running for president or during the campaign, Barrack really rose to prominence, if you will, within the national media and within the political landscape during that inaugural. He was the chairman of that inaugural. Obviously, there's been other allegations and cases involving improprieties in that inauguration. But I think one of the things that people need to understand is this is somebody who has a 30-year relationship with the president. And what's interesting here, Lindsay, is that technically the president is the victim in this case. He was somebody who's lobbied by a foreign government without him knowing that this person was, in Tom Barrack, was somebody that was working for that foreign government. We'll have to see where the case progresses on that front, too.
Do you expect that we'll hear from Trump about this?
I think we always hear from the former president about seemingly a lot of things, so I would be surprised if we did not hear from the president today. All
right. Thanks, Tom, for jumping on this breaking news.
Sure
Appreciate
thing.
it. Republicans are threatening to block tomorrow's vote on advancing the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Legislation is still being written, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer defending his strategy to hold a vote on a shell bill, calling this, quote, a first step.
In order to finish the bill, we first need to agree to start. Let me repeat that. But in order to finish the bill, we first need to agree to start. That's the first step. Let's all agree to start. That's what this week's vote is about, and I hope my Republican colleagues will join us in beginning debate.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins me now. So, Leanne, it seems like right now maybe other people aren't seeing it as in order to finish the bill, we have to start. I mean, here's, for example, what Senator Susan Collins, a member of that bipartisan infrastructure group, had to say.
So if the majority leader would just agree to delay the vote until very early next week, make it the first vote on Monday, then I think we could have language to show our colleagues and be able to move forward.
So Schumer needs at least 10 Republican votes to advance this shell bill. What do you think will happen?
Well, Lindsay, it's looking like the Republicans will not put up the votes in order to allow this process to get started. We're hearing from all Republican leaders who are saying that Schumer won't have the votes because Republicans won't vote for it until this legislative text of this bipartisan infrastructure bill is complete. Now, most people might say, what's the big deal? Why don't just wait till Monday for Schumer to start this process? Well, Democrats are starting to get very wary about Republicans thinking that perhaps they're just trying to stretch out this process as long as possible, perhaps wanting to even delay or kill the legislation because they actually don't want it to pass. That means that trust is really breaking down. I asked Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell today if he is in fact trying to kill this bill by insisting that his members aren't going to vote for this procedural motion tomorrow, and he says, no, that's not the case. Just give us more time. We'll see how this works out, Lindsay, because it's very complicated and it's very unclear of how this is going to sort itself out.
Okay. Well, Leanne, in the meantime, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has finally released the names of the 5 Republicans he's selected for the January 6th committee. Who are they? And is there any word right now from Speaker Pelosi's office, since she'll have the final say on who sits on the committee?
Well, there are the people that he has appointed. There are 5 of them, as you mentioned. 3 of them voted to object to the Electoral College count. That is Representative Jim Banks, that's Jim Jordan, and the 3rd one, which I'm totally blanking right now, and I'm so sorry, but it's not Rodney Davis or Nails. So
Troy
those two,
okay.
Troy Nails. So those 2 actually voted to certify by the election results. But the fact that Leader McCarthy appointed 3 people who voted to object, some are questioning the leader's, insistence that this is going to be a serious committee. As far as Speaker Pelosi is concerned, she hasn't given any indication yet if she's going to reject any of these selections, something that she has written in the legislation giving her the power to do. Today, she told our colleague that she is just going to, she's currently considering who these people are, and she hasn't made any announcement yet.
Well, also happening today, Senator Tammy Duckworth introduced some new legislation giving paid leave for parents following a pregnancy loss. And she says she was inspired by her own personal experience. I mean, Leanne, it kind of seems like a no-brainer here, but tell us more about this bill and what kind of support is behind it.
Yeah, so there's something that does not exist. Well, actually, paid leave doesn't currently exist at all for most Americans, especially government-mandated paid leave. And what she wants to do is she wants to provide 3 days of paid leave for families and mothers who are experiencing pregnancy loss, infertility issues. And she has a very powerful story. She told me that she tried for 10 years to deliver a baby, and she finally did. She was successful. But listen to what she said and why she thinks this is so important.
Going through that process, having a miscarriage at a point where I had already seen the baby's heartbeat was really devastating for me. But, when I found out I had the miscarriage in the doctor's office that morning, I had to go back to work that afternoon. This loss, is something that so many families go through, whether it's a miscarriage or a failed adoption arrangement or a failed surrogacy. I just think that American families deserve the opportunity to deal with the loss in the way that they need to in order to, try to recover. And whether if they choose to try again for a child or whether they just want to go back to work, they can do that.
So, Lindsay, so many women go through this, so many families go through this, and so many suffer in silence. And so what Senator Duckworth is trying to do is give people the space to heal from that experience.
Yeah, really only now are we starting to talk about the trauma that's associated with that. But Leanne, there's so much going on Capitol Hill. We also learned today that an aide to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tested positive for COVID. This person was fully vaccinated. What more do we know about how they may have been exposed and how they're doing?
So this aide was around the Texas Democrats who flew from Texas. We now know that 6 of them have tested positive for COVID. And so that is spread from these Texas Democrats. We are told that the aide is doing well, but the aide was vaccinated. And so this has prompted the Capitol physician around here to recommend, not mandate, but recommend perhaps mask wearing inside in crowded areas. Lindsay.
All right, Leanne, we covered a lot of ground with you. Thanks so much. President Biden is marking 6 months in office by holding his second full cabinet meeting at the White House this afternoon. On the agenda, some of the major issues during these first few months: COVID, infrastructure, and cybersecurity. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memley joins me now. So, Mike, hard to believe that we're talking about, 6 months already, and some states are already still auditing the election results. I guess that's a conversation for another day. But what are the takeaways from today's cabinet meeting?
Yeah, Lindsay, in fact, as I was walking out to this position here on the North Lawn of the White House, I was reminded it was exactly 6 months ago at this very moment that the president was walking through the gates of the White House for the first time after taking the oath of office. It has been a moment at the time when he said he felt like he was going home, but also had a number of campaign promises that he intended to deliver on for the American people. And that was very much the president's message today as he marked this half-year anniversary with his full cabinet. Take a listen.
Bottom line is we're delivering on our promises. We have to deliver on all the promises we've made, because I think we're in a situation where the vast majority of the public agrees with the essence of what we're trying to do. And so I just think that we're showing there's nothing that America is unable to do when we do it together.
Now, Lindsay, this is a moment when the White House had hoped to be able to turn the page somewhat from the crisis it was dealing with in those first 6 months primarily, which is, of course, the COVID crisis, to the rest of the president's agenda on infrastructure. And it's interesting in light of that, what we see in the cabinet room right there. This is the second cabinet meeting that the president has been held. The first one was in the East Room, and that was because they needed to socially distant, be a little bit more separated from one another because of those restrictions. And so you have at least some evidence of the progress they've made. But as we know, with this Delta variant especially, we're seeing the COVID really continue to dominate this president's agenda.
Yeah, and just a couple of months ago, we all would have squirmed if we saw all those cabinet members sitting so close together. Mike, we just talked to Leanne Caldwell on Capitol Hill about a breakthrough case in Speaker Pelosi's office. There's been a breakthrough case of COVID-19 among the White House staff, another fully vaccinated individual testing positive. What do we know?
Yeah, well, what's notable about this is not only is the White House confirming that this particular case is, in fact, the case, that this individual tested positive off campus. They've traced the individual involved and that there are no other contacts with other White House officials. But in the process of confirming this, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki confirmed that other White House staff have, in fact, tested positive over the course of the last several weeks. Now, the White House did make a commitment that if so-called commissioned officers, those are the most senior of the senior White House staff, did test positive, they would proactively disclose that. And so the fact that that has not occurred yet tells us that those officials who are most likely to be in proximity to the president on a regular basis, that has not happened yet. But this is certainly a warning sign for the administration. At this point, though, they say that all the protocols that have been followed at the White House regarding COVID and testing that staff regularly undergo continue to be in place. They don't necessarily see any reason at this point to change those protocols. As they say, they trust the vaccines, they trust the science, and they're going to continue with the status quo.
All right, Mike Memling, thanks so much. The Biden administration will evacuate thousands of Afghans to the U.S. in the coming days as the U.S. military withdraws from the region. Advocacy groups say the walls are closing in on Afghans with links to the U.S. or NATO allies as the Taliban gains ground there. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Cubey has more on the logistics and the dangers facing this operation.
Lindsay, the first group of Afghans will begin arriving here in the United States by the end of the month. These are about 2,500 individuals. About 700 of them or so are individuals who worked specifically with or for the U.S. government in Afghanistan. The others are their family members. Now, these are people who have gone through the special immigrant visa process. It's this long, bureaucratic process that involves a series of background checks and medical checks before an individual can come here to the United States under this special visa process. It can take months, if not years. Now, these Afghans are people who are at the very tail end of the process. Most of them worked as interpreters, some as engineers, but they worked for the U.S. government for a number of years in order to be eligible for this visa. We've heard about these stories for several months now. There are upwards of 18,000+ of these men and women who worked for the United States, many of whom are now going to seek essentially a refugee status here in the United States. Well, we now know that this first group will come here to the U.S. They will be housed for a short time at Fort Lee, Virginia. That's a military base not too far from Richmond. We know from Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby that the U.S. military will be responsible for housing and feeding them, but it will just be for a matter of a couple of days before they are moved. They'll go through a series of medical checks, and then they'll be moved off base where they'll be able to settle here in the United States wherever they want. Now, this again is just this first group. There are thousands more that we're still waiting to see what will happen. These others have not gone through most of the special immigrant visa process. They are much earlier in this process, as we are understanding from a number of U.S. officials. So they are not likely to be brought here to the U.S., at least not initially. Most of them will be taken initially to U.S. military bases, potentially in Central Asia or in the Afghanistan region, or potentially even as some are recommending, to a U.S. military facility in Guam. We're still trying to get more details about that and also how many will be in that next tranche. But the Biden administration has said they're taking this seriously and that many of these individuals will be moved out of Afghanistan before the end of the summer.
It's time for The Bottom Line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. Ben & Jerry's is pulling its ice cream from Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory. NBC News is reporting that a licensing agreement expires next December, and Ben & Jerry's parent company Unilever says it will not be renewed. NBC News senior investigative tech reporter Olivia Salon has been covering this story. She joins me now. So, Olivia, you've been reporting that Ben & Jerry's board had been pushing to stop selling ice cream there for years. The company is saying in a statement, we believe it is inconsistent with our values for Ben & Jerry's ice cream to be sold in the occupied Palestinian territory. What's behind the decision to pull the product?
Well, Ben & Jerry's has faced criticism from human rights groups for more than a decade for selling its products in the Palestinian territories. And the UN Security Council says that these settlements violate international law and infringe on the human rights of Palestinians. So critics argue that it's unethical for the ice cream brand, known for its very strong social mission, to have a presence there. And the Ben & Jerry's board agrees.
So the Ben & Jerry's board and its parent company Unilever are apparently clashing over this decision. Tell us about that.
Well, I talked to the chair of the Ben & Jerry's board, Anurag Mittal, and she said that Unilever released a statement about the decision without the approval of the board. Now, according to Mittal, releasing a statement without the board's sign-off is a violation of a legal agreement that Unilever made when it bought Ben & Jerry's in 2000. And this agreement allowed Ben & Jerry's to maintain control over its social mission, brand integrity, and policies. The Unilever statement said that Ben & Jerry's would continue to sell its ice cream in Israel, but not the occupied territories. Now, the board had approved a different statement which made no reference to continued sales in Israel, since no such agreement exists. And even if it did, it would have to get approved by the board. So for the board, this was a sign that Unilever is trying to destroy the soul of Ben & Jerry's.
And what's Unilever saying about the tension here with the board and about selling the ice cream in Israel?
Well, Unilever didn't respond to my request for comment about the tension with the board, but it did release a statement saying that it's always recognized the right of the brand and the independent board to make decisions about its social mission. But it reiterated its commitment to doing business in Israel.
Ben & Jerry's is not new, of course, as you've mentioned, to taking on issues, particularly progressive stances on them. So what else has the company done to show support here of racial and social justice?
The company's been outspoken on all sorts of issues, including Black Lives Matter, trans rights, refugee rights, defunding the police, and dismantling white supremacy. Now, some of these positions have alienated consumers, leading to boycotts of the brand, and this week's decision was no different.
All right, Olivia, thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you.
Your travel checklist probably sounds something like this: book a flight, then the hotel, then the car. But what if there are no rental cars available? This actually happened to me recently, and a shortage is making it harder and more expensive to get them. NBC News investigative and consumer correspondent Vicki Nguyen has some ideas for other ways to get around as demand revs up.
Car rental companies are scrambling to meet summer travel demand after selling off inventory and pausing new purchases during the pandemic.
We've been in our homes for more than a year, daydreaming of what we will do, where we will go. And now that many people are vaccinated, they have plans to travel.
The car crunch is causing some real sticker shock. According to Kayak, prices for rental cars are up 83% compared to this time in 2019. In places like Miami Beach, Florida, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Lihue, Hawaii, searches for rental cars have skyrocketed.
We're headed to Oahu in Hawaii, and we are finding that rental car prices are absolutely astronomical.
It's prompting some desperate moves.
We actually saved money doing a U-Haul, even with gas included.
I don't think any of us expected such an accelerated return of visitors into Hawaii.
Hawaii's rental car fleet decreased by more than 40% during the pandemic. But the tourism authority says, please don't rent moving vans. Instead, consider peer-to-peer car sharing services. Think of them as an Airbnb for cars. Turo is a big player in the car sharing marketplace. When we checked it out, we found plenty of options and sometimes much lower rates than a rental car. For example, with the same location, dates, and times, to rent a minivan from a car rental, $700 a day, and there's only one left. An SUV, $900. But on Turo, a comparable SUV, $284 a day.
We're hearing from our guests that tour hosts have saved their summer travel plans.
Andre Haddad is the CEO.
How does it compare to traditional rental cars?
We have over 1,500 unique makes and models among all of our listed vehicles. And they also offer delivery of their cars to our guests.
What do you tell people about safety and insurance when using a service like this?
We run safety recalls at the listing, as well as before every trip.
Turo offers a variety of insurance plans at different prices and deductibles.
Our partner is Liberty Mutual, and we offer coverage for liability as well as for any physical damage to the vehicle.
I decided to give it a try.
I'm going to go with this Chevy Equinox. It's $107 a day. Looks like it's got some decent reviews here.
I choose the minimum option for insurance, and the total comes out to $156.83.
Okay, that was pretty easy. My trip is booked.
So what's the pickup process like?
I'm here in Kearney, New Jersey to meet my Turo host, Mabel. Mabel, thank you for agreeing to be here with us. My pleasure. This is my first time renting, so I'll take your lead. Show me what we got to do.
I'll take pictures of the car, then you go around, take pictures of the car.
So we're checking to make sure there's no damage?
Correct.
And that we're on the same page?
Yes.
Cool, let's do it.
Mabel goes first, taking photos of the outside and inside of the car. Then it's my turn.
So there's one little ding here. Got it.
Next, Mabel checks my license.
Victoria, you're good to go.
Finally, the keys.
Thank you so much.
When I'm done, I return the car the same way I picked it up. Other peer-to-peer options like Get Around let you rent for an hourly rate. Every trip with Avail, backed by Allstate, is covered with their insurance. And with a membership, Zipcar lets you rent for a daily or hourly rate. Ways to make sure your summer travel plans don't hit a speed bump.
Back open for business. With small businesses hit hard by the pandemic, the open sign hanging on a front door or window has a whole new meaning. So a graphic designer is reinventing the important symbol. We got to look at how the signs are making an impact.
Illustration really allows me the ability to tell a story. It really helps me to be able to give a voice to not only myself, but to other people who are underrepresented, to minorities who didn't always have a place. My name is Sophia Yeshi. I'm an illustrator and graphic designer from Baltimore, Maryland, currently living in Brooklyn, New York. So Wells Fargo reached out to me a couple of months ago, and I created custom open signs for 2 small businesses along with 2 other artists. And I was really able to highlight these small businesses and what they experienced through the pandemic, and that turned into the year-long collaboration of being their first ever artist in residence. So the last sign that I created is the universal open sign, and it really is supposed to represent all 30 million businesses that were impacted by the pandemic in all industries. So I really wanted to show as wide of a range of industries and people as possible, and also make it really bright and colorful and super eye-catching.
Sophia comes by and supports us, and in terms of the laundry. And so she said, hey, how would you like to have maybe an open sign, back to business kind of thing going on and welcoming people in? And I said, I would love it. To have an artist that lives in the community, have a sign that was designed for small businesses. It means so much to me to have the sign here and to be supportive of local artists.
So growing up, I really didn't have a lot of mentors or people to look up to that were women of color or even Black designers at all. Like, it wasn't a space that I saw people that I knew in. It was just something that I knew I wanted to do. So by being able to kind of fill that space myself, I feel like I am shining light on a lot of underrepresented people who really need it. Although my work may not be overtly political and I don't respond to every social event, I think by showing joy and the different trials and tribulations that we experience, especially as small business owners, being able to shine a light on other small businesses, I think it is really important to be able to bring attention to these issues. I'm very proud that Wells Fargo is bringing more visibility to small businesses. I think especially after the pandemic, they could use as much support as possible. So anyone can download this sign if you go on wellsfargo.com/together. And also pretty soon you'll be able to go to a Wells Fargo bank and you can pick up a sign for yourself, for your business.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.